Hello and welcome to another lesson from me, the History Tutor, and this time we're looking at AQA's conflict and tension topic of the cause of the First World War, and we're looking at the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. In this lesson today, we're going to be looking at the source skills from the AQA paper. In the conflict and tension one, there are two types of source questions. This type one is going to be the how useful question, which is 12 marks and requires you to look at two sources. So students find this quite challenging, so we're going to go through an example together, and you can use your revision guide to fill in the answers. So let's go over to the question now. Okay, so here is our source question. As I said, question number 2 on your AQA paper on conflict and tension. So having a quick read of the question, it says, how useful are sources B and C to historians studying the impact of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand? Explain your answer using source B and C and your contextual knowledge. So before we delve into what the sources mean and what sort of ideas we have here, so what does all this mean in terms of these questions? What sort of skills do we need to show? So have a look at your revision guide and you'll have the question there in front of you. So what type of skills do you think you should show for this type of question? Have a look at those command words, how many marks it is, what you're going to do to answer this question successfully. So pause and list some of the ideas you think are relevant. Okay, so here's what I've got down then. So you obviously need to respond to how useful is one of the key phrases there. So how useful are the sources? And, it's not asking you to say which is the most useful or to even say compare them. So you can do individual how useful are these sources. Each source can be treated separately with an analysis of how useful they are. And if you want to bring them together in your conclusion, you can do, but initially it's a separate analysis of the sources. You must discuss the content of the source with the evidence, and you must also suggest some meaning. So you're going to have to use the sources. It says use the source. So use it in some way, either describe something you see, or a better skill would be to suggest meaning from the source and then assess the meaning. You need to explain why the source content is useful and or not useful. So obviously that how useful phrase, you need to explain with your knowledge how the source is useful or not useful. So you need to use knowledge of events to explain the source in detail. You must explain two views about the source. For top marks, these views should be a content view and a provenance view. And we'll talk about what those are shortly if you're not quite sure. Or you could just explain two content views or two provenance views. But obviously you must use the source and you must explain with some knowledge. Used to explain ways the provenance is useful and or not useful, again, for those top marks, assessing the provenance. You must do this for both sources, obviously. And you should conclude your view about how useful the sources are. Okay, so a lot to do for 12 marks. So let's delve into the sources a little bit. So have a look at your sources and start to label the key evidence and the messages of the source, things you think are useful and not useful about them. Okay, so pause and give that a go. Okay, so source B then, some of the things you might have noticed about source B. Obviously, it's a giant hand or arm coming to crush a character that seems to have Serbian written next to it, or obviously a foreign language version of Serbian. So Serbia is shown as a small little animal with a knife in its hand. This suggests they are maybe violent, they're weaker because they're smaller, maybe a little bit of a sort of naughty type creature as well. They're not very well behaved. Then the source suggests that the stronger arm is Austria-Hungary. So they will crush Serbia due to the assassination. So Austria is big and strong, Serbia is small and weak. And then the provenance is a card by the Austro-Hungarians. So there's propaganda to show that Serbia will be easily crushed by Austria for their bad behavior. So maybe there's a purpose here of trying to gather support for crushing the sort of naughty Serbians who have caused problems for Austria. So what about this second source? Hopefully you've labelled some ideas about this one. If not, then pause and have a go. So this second source then, a slightly different viewpoint. So the source says that Germany will not interfere in the events between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. This suggests that Austria-Hungary will have to make the decision of what to do, but Germany will not stop them. Germany will not get involved. Furthermore, it says they will faithfully stand by Austria-Hungary. due to their alliance. So this suggests obviously maybe the blank check idea that Austria-Hungary can do as likes, Germany will support them. Then the provenance further supports this because the German Chancellor, now the German Chancellor is the Prime Minister, not like the Chancellor in the UK where they're in charge of money. In Germany, the Chancellor is the Prime Minister. So this clearly is one of the most significant people in the land of Germany and will understand their promise they've made to Austria-Hungary, that it means Austria-Hungary can basically do what they like and they will faithfully stand by. Germany will not interfere. So there's quite a lot of ideas there. Now, how useful are those ideas? So we need to obviously use our knowledge to explain that. So how the answer will look is something like this. We will obviously repeat the question back and give our idea about how useful it is with our reason why. We'll then discuss some information from the content, and then we'll try and explain with our knowledge whether that content is useful or not. And then we'll maybe try and do some provenance work for that source. As I said earlier, if you're struggling with the provenance, you can explain two content ideas, but we're going to try and do a top level answer where we do content and provenance for both sources. So let's give this a go. All right. So firstly, I'll start you off with source B. So source B is very useful about the impact of assassination because it shows that the Austro-Hungarians want revenge against Serbia and will attempt to destroy them. Okay, so what evidence you see or message you get from the content and source to back that up? So you can start with that sentence if you like, or you can slightly change it using your revision guide and start to fill in the answer and add some evidence from the source. Remember, you probably want to spend maybe only 7 or 8 minutes on this particular source. So one sentence about the source is probably plenty. 2 sentences maximum if you're going to do a suggestion of some content you see. Okay, so over to you. All right, so have you paused me and got an idea down? So here's what I've written. You can self-assess using this. So for example, the content source shows a large Austrian fist attempting to crush a weak Serbia. Okay, it doesn't need any more than that, really, does it? Because I've given a lot in the opening sentence. I've said that Austro-Hungarians want revenge for the assassination. So it's already, the meaning's already in the opening sentence. This is useful about assassination of the Archduke because, remember, the question is impact of the assassination. So let's give some impact assassination then. Explain with your knowledge how we know this is useful. Okay, think about the events, think about what happened in the assassination, think about what happened after. How can we prove that this is a useful source? Okay, pause me and over to you. A couple of sentences of knowledge to explain your answer. All right, so here's what I've gone for. Again, you can self-assess. You might have picked different things, but the main thing is, have you given content and events to back up your idea? This is useful about assassination of the Archduke because it suggests that Austria-Hungary are determined to attack Serbia, and this would then lead to a wider war, especially as Serbia, a smaller nation, shown as a small animal, a small nation, Austria-Hungary, shown as a large hand, will lead to Russia coming to protect Serbia against attack in an unfair war. This would then unravel the alliance system, of course. So you can explain that, obviously, the Serbians are not handing over the murderers. So Austria-Hungary are getting ready for war to crush the naughty Serbians. And they understand, obviously, that there's going to be a wider war here. So you've got to try and get people to support this wider war because Russia might well come and attack. And we can develop this further when we look at the provenance. So thinking about the provenance now, so furthermore, the provenance is useful because now you might not necessarily you might not necessarily want to think about the date or who made it. You might want to think about the purpose of this card. What are the Austrians trying to do with this card and this propaganda, perhaps? Have a think about that and see if you can explain how that helps you understand the impact of the assassination. Okay, so over to you. Jot down your ideas. Okay, so here's what I've gone for. So furthermore, the provenance is useful because it is an Austro-Hungarian postcard of propaganda. This supports the impact of the assassination, that it's going to be an invasion of Serbia, as the Austro-Hungarian government is trying to convince people to support the war. There were many nationalities in Austria-Hungary, over 15 different languages, so obviously all those people needed convincing to support the war effort. And of course, you could extend that further, that of course, Russia might get involved as well. So it's not going to just be a local conflict with Serbia. It could be a big war that this needs lots and lots of support from the people. Okay, so that's source B done. So what about source C? Okay, so how are you going to start source C? So I started the last one for you. So have a think, how are you going to start this source? What would be a good idea? Look at your revision guide, look at the source. What would be a useful argument about that source? All right, so I hope you paused and given it a go. Here's my idea. So source C is very useful again about the impact of assassination because it shows that Germany gave a blank check that encouraged Austria to go to war. Okay, so that's the famous argument, of course, the blank check. So, for example, the content says that Germany will faithfully stand by their dual alliance partner and will not interfere in the July crisis. Okay, so how's this useful about the assassination of the Archduke? What are the consequences of this? How is this important? Can you add some knowledge? Again, looking for a couple of sentences of knowledge here. So over to you. What would be some good knowledge? Right, so here we are. Here's some knowledge then you could have given. So this is useful about the assassination of the Archduke because Austria-Hungary interpreted this as unconditional support for their actions in Serbia. This meant they had the confidence to attack Serbia, the knowledge that Germany would help them in a wider war if the Russians got involved and the alliance system unraveled to some degree. So what about the provenance? So it's this German chancellor, it's about the time of the events. So how do you think that could be useful? So again, pause and give some ideas. So here we are then. So furthermore, the provenance is useful because it is from the German chancellor and therefore the true view of the German government. This means it's useful about the impact of the assassination. It shows that the Kaiser has given his full support and would be happy to go to war. So remember, there were events like the Moroccan crisis where the dual alliance were embarrassed. So, the Kaiser's not going to back down over this instant now. The dual alliance is going to stand firm against other countries. So then you can conclude about how useful the sources are individually. You could give a summary together, perhaps, as well, about how together they are very useful. Also, they give a picture of sort of two sides of the argument, as it were. Okay, there we are. I hope you found that useful. The source question is one of the more challenging questions. I know students in my class would like to avoid doing those questions as much as possible. So breaking that down into the different sources and looking at content and provenance and then knowledge, and I hope that that's a useful technique for you to follow. So if you want to practice more of those questions because you find them a bit of a challenge, then obviously look through my revision guide to get more questions to practice and look out for more of my videos. Okay, bye-bye for now.